Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and we're going to work on a reel today that was part of my fishing reel flea market find video a couple of weeks ago. It's been quite busy here as I've been doing spring tune-ups for a lot of my customers and some online folks as well. But I have a chance now, a couple of minutes, so we're going to tune this one up. This is the Daiwa GX15X. The GS is Gold Series. This is a nice reel. It's got some what we would call boat rash or some deterioration on the paint, some bubbling, but otherwise the reel's in pretty good shape. There is a little grind going on here, but I'm noticing that there's some buildup of something here. I'm not sure what it is, but we'll get at it and we'll clean it up, and that should take that away as well. This is a nice reel. It's a 3-ball bearing reel, kind of a predecessor to the Black Gold series. And it's something that can last a long time with care and maintenance, and we'll show you how to do that today. If you have this reel, you'll learn how to tune it up, clean it up, and put it back into service, keep it in good condition. If you don't have the reel and you were wondering what's inside the reel, well, that's what we're going to show you as well. So before I go much further, a couple of things. I would encourage you to subscribe if you like the videos that I'm doing here. That way you don't miss any of the ones that come after this, and it also helps my channel. That's one of the things that keeps my channel going, is those subscriptions. Secondly, a couple of precautions. I wear a protective glove here. I guess with the coronavirus going around here, it's a little bit more difficult to get these gloves, but I would recommend that you use one of them to keep this stuff off your hands. We'll see that there's some dirt and buildup and accumulation. You don't want to get that those oils and greases and that on you if you can avoid it. Also, I use a parts tray. It's just the back of a milk jug, but it keeps all of my pieces and parts together, and that way when I go to reassemble, I know where they are. So let's get started by taking this reel apart. This has a little push down for your spool removal. Simply pulls off. There's if we come underneath, this is kind of a setup almost like a Mitchell type of a reel. You'll have a an adjuster up top here. You'll have a kind of a gear or whatever coming through it, and then we have the threads with the drag washers inside of it held in with a C-clip, and we'll come back and we'll service that in a little bit, but I just wanted to show you how that comes together or comes apart. That's the last thing I typically do. I'm just a creature of habit here. And then underneath we've got two things going here. We have a shaft that we're going to have to remove the rotor. As I mentioned, there's some kind of junk or crud or something going on here that we'll clean up. And let's take this apart, because I think what I want to do, because of the condition of this reel and some of the buildup of grease and that, is I'm going to put this into my ultrasonic cleaner first. So we'll take this apart, and then we'll give it an ultrasonic cleaning. If you didn't have the ultrasonic cleaner, you can use all kinds of cleaners. You can use chrome polish, you can use some WD-40 to loosen some grease, you can use steel wool and the like, but I find that if I have a buildup of things like salt and calcium and stuff like that, this ultrasonic cleaner tends to do a good job. I have one. It's a small one. I purchased it through Amazon, and I didn't pay a whole lot. I paid I think $60 maybe. So if you're going to do this a lot, then I would recommend you go with that. Okay, well, we can see why it's sluggish. Here's the inside of the case. We have a ball bearing here, I think. Yep, we have a sleeve and a ball bearing. She should be able to take off. That's kind of clogged down. It almost looks, it's very dirty grease, whether it's fishing grease or whether it's some other kind of grease. That's probably why that one's not operating very well. And as I was telling you about keeping it off your hands, I wish I could put one on this hand, because that would help me be even better at this, but unfortunately I find working with it is very difficult. So we have a cross wind block here. We have a little pin. I'm going to pull that pin out. Oh, we should be able to pull that pin out. Maybe we just can lift it off here. Yeah, we lift it off. Notice the orientation on this. So this looks like a backwards number 9, make sure that it goes in this way as opposed to this way when you go to reinstall. Just take pictures. That's another suggestion that I usually have along the way. If you want to make certain that you put it back the way you found it, take pictures at critical junctions when you're removing pieces and parts. In this case, I'm doing a video, so if I get stuck there, I could come and get that video and backtrack it to where we were. Okay, now I can take the crosswind block off because there's a little Phillips head screwdriver that I use to take that screw out. I'll put that into my parts tray, and this crosswind block should now be able to be free. There you go, and we can pull the axle shaft out. Notice on your axle shaft, it's a D-shaped axle shaft, it's not a round one, and when we go to reinstall there, it's going to fit into the crosswind block. Here's your crosswind block. Wouldn't hurt if you just want to keep track of your parts, put the axle shaft back in there, and lay that in the basket. You could also take the screw and do that as well. Once you pull that off, then you can remove your main gear. Again, that's kind of an ugly situation there. The back bearing, and those are all clogged, so that's why this reel is doing the way it is. Here's a bunch of just hard shellacked over grease there. We'll take that off, and then we come up top now and find the appropriate wrench. You notice I have a whole bunch of wrenches on my table here. Some people are a little bit more organized. I kind of go with the big picture approach, know where the tools are, maybe not the right one completely, but know where they are, and that way you can get to them. All right, finally found it. It's a 14 millimeter. So I'm trying to go counterclockwise, and it's not cooperating. So I need to work on it a little bit. You don't want to over tighten. There we go. So it is a counterclockwise screw. It's a traditional threading. Sometimes if you start yanking it and you find out that it's not working, try the other direction, because some of these are contra-threaded. Now we can pull the rotor off, and you'll see underneath in the assembly here. Well, we're going to come back to this assembly. There is a couple of things going on here. Notice the little tab here. There's kind of a U-shaped tab on the dog that's holding a spring in. That spring controls the anti-reverse. So this is one that's run by force. There's a little collar here. There's a spring that runs around that collar, and as you go in one direction or the other, it's going to reset. I'm going to take that off now. I wanted to show you that. And I'm going to lay that in my parts tray. And I'm going to take the star that holds that in, because I wanted to get down to that bearing. So normally I would just say that we could kind of spray it and get away from it, but I'm looking at the condition of the other bearings, and I'm going to assume that this one is equally junked up. So we're going to remove the collar now that holds the bearing and the pinion gear in place there. I might be able to do that with a Phillips head. I think I can leave the dog in place. I don't think I have to pull the dog in order to pull the assembly. May or may not work. And then underneath with the collar itself, it looks like it can go either way here. It looks like there's a flat side on both. Sometimes you'll find a collar has a flat side for one to fit a particular need in the body, and then other times, like this is the case here, it doesn't need that. All right, well, we're bumping into the dog, but I think we're going to get away without pulling that dog off. There's no reason I couldn't take the dog off at that point. I'm going to. Okay, here's our main gear then. All right, well, we're going to pause the video here. I'm going to go to that ultrasonic cleaner. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup before I put it in there, because there's no sense that of just having all the grease in there if you can get rid of some of it. You'll notice that there's grease in the tracks here. I'm going to use a little awl just to get rid of that old grease. You can see how it'll come out if I just slide that up the track. If you don't have an awl, you can use a toothpick or a pin or a small nail or something. But well, I'm going to go ahead and clean that up. I'm going to just spray this a little bit with some WD-40 before. I'll use a cotton swab on something like this to get that old grease off of there before we give it a bath. You can see how it's just kind of coagulated all about. And I'll come back and we'll reset this after the parts have been cleaned, and we'll show you how to reassemble as well as deal with the drags on the spool, and we'll try and clean this up as well. So let's stop and I'll be back in a moment or two. Okay, so everything's back nice and clean. I did some by hand like the bearings, and I did others with the ultrasonic cleaner. Now, a word of caution on the ultrasonic cleaners. If you're using them, I recommend just straight water. Maybe mild dish detergent. But if you use anything beyond that, there are solvents in some that will take the glues off, take the badges off, mar the coloring of them, and so on. So just be careful if you're going to go ahead and use those. So let's go ahead and put this thing back together then. So it's got a nice clean case here that I worked on by hand. I used a series of things like the cotton swabs and others after we got done with the ultrasonic. You'll see that for the most part it did make it nice and clean. I'm going to grab some fishing reel grease. In this case I'm using Penn Precision Reel Grease. It's not, you don't have to use Daiwa greases. In this case, this is the Penn Precision Reel Grease that I use. It's a blue grease. I do recommend that you use fishing reel grease as you go ahead and do this. All right, let's. We've cleaned that out. You can see we have nice clear channels. We're going to go ahead and put grease back into that. When you use any kind of cleaning you're doing, if you're removing the old grease, you got to remember to replace it. We'll grab the bearing, which goes on the top sleeve there, and I've got some oil that I'm going to put on that bearing. Again, fishing reel oil. We're going to go ahead and reseat that back in here, and then you'll remember we had this little collar, and then we want to make sure that we get that collar tied down before we go any further. So there's the two little screws that go with that. These kind of seem like they held magnetically, so hopefully we'll be able to get them without a lot of trouble. That's the one. So we're just tightening that one down. Now remember what we had next. We had there's a collar, and there's the click, and then there's this little eccentric spring, and remember that goes over the top and it fits into that groove. So there we go. If we've done this right now, we can turn this and we'll see that our anti-reverse is operating the way it should, and that's perfect. Okay, so now we can come back to the body. We'll take one of these bearings and we'll insert that in the back end of the case. Give it a good drink of oil. Go grab the main gear now. That's all been cleaned up as well. This one was done by hand. I didn't put this one into the ultrasonic. I just used a series of cotton swabs and paper cloths and the like. Put a little bit on the shafts on both sides. The bearings are going to ride on those. Once you do that, then you can install that into the bearing. Next step then would be to install the rotor. Now, this did go into the bath. Remember we had some stuff that was kind of accumulated in the tracks there that was causing a little noise, so that got done there. When you do that, then you got to re-oil your points on the bail as well as the little trip lever underneath, which I've taken care to do. Now remember that this one goes on in the traditional clockwise attachment. It's that 14mm nut, so let's get that on there and tie that down before we go any further. Now we can go ahead with the crosswind block. Remember I put the axle into that just to kind of keep the orientation proper. I've already lubed up the one side. So now I can go and install. You can give this a light coating of grease. Don't go crazy because there is a tight tolerance inside the pinion gear there. If you put too much in, it's just going to bunch up the top and it's not going to be effective. Once you have that seated back into the crosswind block, come back and get your little tie down screw there. It goes inside there and holds your axle in place. In this case, I got a steel screw, yay, magnetic tip holds. Okay, we'll just get that in there. And then we've got the cleaned up crosswind arm. And remember what I said, it looked like the backwards 9, so that would be the 9. It goes this way. I'm going to go grab some grease and put that onto the track here so that it rides smoothly. And put a little bit on the back too. It's not going to hurt anything. Then over the point. And then if you can't align the gear, just keep turning the gear until it aligns into where it belongs. There we go. So that's properly aligned now. Now we come back on with the shield. Nope, shield goes on the other side. Bearing and then the shield. And that can actually go inside the case here, as such. Then we have this pin is going to ride in this channel over here, so put a little bit of grease into that channel where that pin rides. Still don't have it. Then you can just invert it, put it into play, make sure that it's nice and tight all around before you go putting the screws in. And then we'll come up top and we'll do the drag washers. We'll just check on them. I'm not quite sure what drag washers are in here. There's 3 types of drag washers. There's a fabric or a leather type of a drag washer. There's a Teflon type of a drag washer. And there's a felt drag washer. And they're all treated a little bit differently. The leather ones get drag grease on them to keep them flexible. The felt washers get oil on them, again for the same idea, to give them some grip and keep them fresh. And the Teflon, which happens to be a petroleum product, doesn't get anything. It's a kind of a self-lubricating kind of a deal. Okay, that should take care of that. We've got one more piece down below here, which is the handle. And it should be starting to turn now. We've got a nice reel going there. Just check the bail operation, which is fine. So let's go back over here then and do the drag service. So there's a circular ring here. There's a pivot point on 2 sides where you can actually apply pressure inside to pull that ring. So we're just going to use that pick of mine to pull that out. This is a spring. Be careful, it will shoot if you're not paying much attention there. Let's just go ahead and pull the stack. I'm going to leave that last one in there. That last one's a hard washer. And it sits in a cup. Oh, we can get it out. Sometimes you got to be careful with this. If you, that's a good thing we did because there's some junk underneath here. So let's get that out with a cotton swab. Then we just want to make sure these are clean. First one is kind of a rubber type of a fabric. I'm going to vote for leather on this one. I'm going to put some Cal's Universal Drag Grease on this. Simply dip it into there. I use my gloved hand to wipe it around, wipe off the excess, and put that back into the carrier. And then I have these reversed. So I'll lay them out on my table here. But these are Teflon washers, so nothing more happens here other than to keep them clean. So I'm going to put the Teflon in. We'll put the eared washer in. And that's got to ride in the channel, so make sure you get it in the channel there. We'll clean the second one of these up. And we'll clean the top one off. This one's like the letter D, and you're going to find that when we do this over here that there's one flat side there. And then we can take that clip again, put that back into the groove, and again hold it. This thing will shoot when you put it under pressure if you don't aren't careful there. We got to get that back in now, so we're, oops. And I'm just noticing I hid one of those washers, and that tells me that there's a washer that belongs in the bottom of the stack there, so let's go ahead and get it right again. Pull that stack out. I'm going to go back to the first one and put that floating washer. And we'll put the next Teflon in. Then the eared washer. Come back in, and now we're back in with that stack. So it's that's why you want to keep your parts in a single place here, and not spread them out across your table, because we may have gotten to a point there where we didn't recognize that that part was missing. All right, now I'm just lining this up so that I can get the shaft all the way through. Place the button on it. Drag adjuster knob. Then we put that back on the reel. Okay, we're on. And there we go. So not only is it cleaned up, but it's all oiled and lubed. It's in nice condition. It's a 3 ball bearing reel. Good. And boy, this one's going to have a nice day fishing. So even though it's labeled as a 15 reel, it's the GS 15. Even though it's labeled as a 15, it's more of a 30 size reel. I think that over time somebody's going to start to standardize all of this stuff. But Daiwa is one of those that has kind of an odd sizing, at least on the older reels. So there you go. That's the Daiwa Gold Series GS 15 X, and boy, is that a nice reel. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, again, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. If you liked the video, please indicate that. And if you have questions on this or any other reels, please leave them in the comments. I try to respond to all questions and comments that are left on the videos. So with that, I'm going to thank you. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.